Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer. With me once again is my good friend Deb Romero, certified Alexander technique instructor. And today's topic, it's October 30th, I think. So Halloween. Last podcast we did talked about treats. So I thought today we talk about tricks. And tricks is a funny topic. Like
Yes.
some people talk about tricks, or some people actually perform tricks. So like there's circus tricks, and it's kind of become popular to do these liberty tricks with horses and things like that. So there's a whole category of working with horses in the realm of tricks. And I've done some trick training. I did it with my horse, but I lean to the practical side of tricks.
That's me.
Yeah, like I go, there's tricks, even the way we talked about trailer loading using positive reinforcement. That's kind of a trick. Like you're teaching a horse the trick of getting in the trailer voluntarily. So that was what I would put in the category of a very practical trick training.
Yeah, I'm getting more clear on it now. But so when my big mare was born, I knew she was going to be huge. So the first thing I taught her was to put her head down. So I could
So
put
you
the
could
halter on
reach.
because I knew she was going to be 17 hands. And I'm like, I'm only 5'1". How am I going to halter this horse?
Yeah,
So that was the first thing I taught her, was to put her head down by a light tap on her neck. Who knew?
right.
Who knew?
And
20 years later.
I think most people think of horse training as what we would categorize as condition response. So condition response or positive reinforcement to get a horse to do something you want it to do is a trick, right?
Could
It's
be considered that, I
yes.
guess. Yeah.
So it
I think
comes
it's
back.
survival. Survival in
There's
the horse world.
there's a whole nother layer to working with horses that is actually more dynamic and is authentic communication between two individuals. But most people think of horse training as trick training to some degree, that it's a condition response, that you give cues and they give you a response to the cue, and that you use positive and negative reinforcement to basically get the horse to perform.
Yeah.
So whether it's practical tricks like the trailer loading or it's getting your horse to bow, which is not really a practical trick. I'm not sure when you would use that unless you need the horse to bow in order to get your foot in the stirrup. Okay, that might
Right.
be
I've seen people
practical.
do that.
Yes. Yeah. So when it comes to tricks, I think as the horse owner and sort of the guardian of our horse, are we doing the tricks or teaching the tricks to serve our purpose or to play with the horse, maybe engage the mind, like playing with puzzles? Or do we think that's training? Because to me, training is like a conversation, it's a dynamic interaction that you never quite know where it's going to go. So the horse has an opinion, you have an opinion, you discuss it, you negotiate it. And to me, and how we use our body has a dynamic effect on their movement, their mechanics, how they organize the forces of motion. So to me, that's what I call horse training. And then tricks is sort of like, okay, how do I get the horse to deal with a trailer? Or how do I make bridling easier for me? And how do I gain the horse's acceptance of something that's a necessary part of the domestic environment that a wild horse
Yeah.
isn't just going to do for you?
True. Yeah.
So
I think of a trick. Is that something, I don't know, that, like you said, is it a stimulus for us? Is it a do thing, being in the I ask this, you do that world? Is it because you have to do it for safety? There's a lot of
Yeah.
questions that come up
So
for me.
like I was able to take a tour one time, an all-day tour of the Pittsburgh Zoo. And it was a great zoo because what they did is instead of for necessary medical purposes, maintenance, or medical care, instead of stressing the animals out, they used operant conditioning to teach tricks to all the animals for the practical purpose of administering needles,
Yeah.
drawing blood, taking temperature, checking the mouth, checking the teeth, checking the paws, checking the ears. And it was a fantastic use of like operant conditioning is basically trick training. You're giving a positive reinforcement food for something that the animal figured out how to do. So
Okay.
like the video I did on trailer loading using only positive reinforcement treats is like a puzzle. You're getting the animal to figure out what do I have to do to get the positive reinforcement. And that could be food, affection, clicker training, all of that's positive reinforcement. And when you use positive reinforcement, it whatever you're teaching becomes kind of a puzzle. And it's how you do trick training, right? So at the zoo, it was a brilliant use of it because all of the necessary domestic care, trimming the nails, it's like we have to trim hooves. I go, how do you get, like they trained the big cats to come to the chain link fence or the bars and lean their neck up against the bars in order to draw blood from the jugular or give an
Wow.
injection. No stress. I go, brilliant use of operant conditioning,
Yeah.
right? And then we went to the polar bears, and it was like the polar bears would come up to the bars where you could reach through the bars to say, give a needle or give a treatment, but the handler was safe. You're on the other side of the bars. But these bears with hand signals would present the paw. So you could check all the pads, you could check the
Wow.
nails, open the mouth, put your ear through the bars so we can examine the ear, right? And I go, it was stress free. It created some mental stimulation for the animals at the zoo. And it kept all of the necessary domestic sort of requirements for wild animals very easy,
Wow.
easy, safe, stress free. I go, that is trick training at its best.
Yeah.
And I go, so I look at like trailer loading or getting a horse to take the bit or the bridle, or like you said, your big horse helping you out, putting the head
Mhm.
down so you could put the halter or the bridle on. Those are all practical, positive versions of trick training. Right. And most people are thinking of tricks like I can stand on my horse's back and crack a whip. I can lay my horse down. I can, teach my horse Spanish walk. I can get my horse to do any activity that doesn't serve a practical purpose. I
Uh-huh.
go, that kind of thing. And
Uh,
and there still can be a lot of value to it if we treat tricks like a puzzle. I go, it can be mentally stimulating for a horse to learn something that's completely impractical.
I
But,
never thought of it that way. That's a good point.
the process is the horse using their mind and then getting positive reinforcement for sort of thinking their way through this nonverbal communication into solving a specific puzzle or doing something.
And I wonder if it's good for us because we lack in nonverbal communication. It's not a place we spend a whole lot of time.
We're not very good at it.
No,
Yeah. Yeah. But trick
I can hear
training,
hear my neighbor now yelling at her horses out in the field. I
yeah,
couldn't
because
care.
as humans, we are, especially with horses, which are prey animals, even though they're large and powerful, they have the mentality of they don't want trouble. They don't want to succumb to the wrath of a predator. So as humans, what happens with horses a lot is we rapidly shift from positive reinforcement to negative reinforcement.
I agree with that completely.
We scare them into the trick, or we beat them into the trick, or we make it so uncomfortable for them, which is all negative reinforcement really is you're making whatever they're doing currently so uncomfortable that they choose to change what they're doing.
Mm.
That's what negative reinforcement is, where positive reinforcement is a spontaneous reward for something that they chose to do that you do want. A negative is when they're doing something you don't want and you're making that choice uncomfortable. So like trailer loading, for example, most people are using a huge pull and pressure on the halter and lead rope, or a stick to make staying outside of the trailer so uncomfortable that the horse chooses to get in. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. You know, it can lead to trouble far faster than positive reinforcement, but sometimes it's necessary and there's nothing wrong with it, especially if it's done gently. But it's understanding that negative reinforcement makes what the horse is doing uncomfortable, where positive reinforcement makes what the horse is doing more comfortable. That's the difference. And so operant conditioning and clicker training are all based on positive reinforcement.
So what if, so this question just came up in my mind. What if you, I don't know if goal is a good word, but say you want to move the horse towards something you know is going to make them feel better, but they're going to go through some discomfort to get there.
Can you give me an example?
Like my big mare, she has a rotation in her thoracic to the left, or she did. I don't think it's there anymore. And knowing that I had to do some specific maneuvers with her, which weren't very comfortable for her, but we're going to get her to a better place long term.
Mechanically.
Yeah.
Now you're way outside of trick training.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, that what I consider horse training, which is developing a sense of safety and mechanical correct use of their body, that is dynamic. And you cannot use operant conditioning to get the job done. You could say, in a sense, you're balancing between positive and negative reinforcement as tools of communication.
Yeah.
But it's now you're going way beyond what most people consider training to be. That's where you step into the dynamics, because the mechanical use of the body and how horses think and feel is out of our control.
Right.
That's a negotiation. And it is so complicated that the thought that we could use aids as negative reinforcement to create the correct, precise coordination of the spine in motion at any given time is ridiculous. It's just pure hubris that we think we can put a horse together better than a horse can put themselves together.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, is what I consider horse training, which is the development of the horse's innate talent and coordination, right? So that, not a trick, right? And it's good because you can't, when you're altering the coordinate or helping our horse alter the coordination of the body, you have to make an old dysfunctional habit somewhat uncomfortable for them in a dynamic way until they discover a better use that is also more comfortable. So it's using positive and negative reinforcement at the same time, but it's more of a tool for communication rather than, you couldn't go to the horse and say, hey, correct your spinal dysfunction and I'll give you a treat. It's not going to happen. It is absolutely not going to happen. So when we're in the realm of trick training, all we can train them for is a gesture, a movement.
So it's to me, it's coming up from an Alexander perspective, is you're doing something, you know, and you're wanting an end gain from it, an end result.
So let's
Whereas,
take a really popular sport that lots of people play, golf, right? So the trick training part of it is you have to use these clubs. You use certain clubs for certain purposes. And here's essentially what you do. You swing the club, you hit the ball. Okay. You can teach a monkey to do that, right? I don't think a horse can do it. No opposable thumbs.
right,
But it's like that is the equivalent of trick training. So you can get somebody to go through the motions of it using positive and negative reinforcement. But can you make them good at it?
right.
No. That is where actual, like the Alexander technique is not teaching you how to pick up. It's not teaching you like, what do I want to say? The essence of riding a bike. Like it's not teaching you how to just pedal and stay upright on a bike. It's helping you become efficient and use yourself better while riding a bike.
Yeah, there's a saying in the Alexander community that the Alexander technique can even make a burglar a better burglar.
Yeah. So the burglar already learned how to burgle,
Yeah,
but the real training, like the deeper layer of training, or you could say the higher levels of training, either way, is sort of getting into the use of the body and the mind during the task,
exactly.
right? What trick training is teaching tasks. It's
Right.
just task
It's
training,
got an end goal. You've
right?
got your end gaining as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
You've
And
got something in your head that you want the horse to perform.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
most people will think of horse training as if the horse goes forward when you kick, kick with your legs or hit with the whip and they walk, track, canter without trying to kill you, you're golden. Like that's the end of training. And I go, no, those are just the tasks we do with horses.
Exactly. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Those are
So,
just the things we ask.
yes. So every rider has to put a saddle on a horse. That's a task, right? Has to
Mhm.
put a bridle on a horse. That's a task. Has to be able to get on the horse without the horse bucking, rearing, or trying to kill them. That's a task, right? Has to walk the horse, steer left and right, go to a trot, go to a canter, steer left and right, maybe go over a jump, right? Maybe perform a pattern. That's a
Right.
task. So all of those tasks could be achieved through, as like I would say, practical trick training, condition response,
Yes.
positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, but that doesn't mean they're good at it. And it doesn't mean they
Exactly.
like it.
Oh, that's a good point.
It doesn't mean the horse likes it. I mean, the human may love it, but the horse may hate it.
That's the controversy I was having in my head, because it seems a horse wouldn't do that out in the pasture by themselves or with their buddies. You know what I mean?
Right.
I've never seen a horse bow out in the pasture by itself, or
I have
you
seen,
know.
I had a horse who did downward dog every day in
Yeah,
the
I've seen
cross
them do
ties.
that.
Yeah, in the cross ties without ever putting pressure on the cross ties. He could do downward
Whoa.
dog and he just did it to give himself a stretch. He loved that stretch.
Yeah, I've seen them stretch, but not like we think they should stretch. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, and that when we talk about trick training, I go, you're teaching a horse a task. So, like, I use positive reinforcement to really build the confidence. I'm also looking at the mind. I'm looking at whether or not the horse feels safe
Mhm.
doing the task, right? So, trailer loading is just that. It's just a task.
Mhm.
And if you use positive reinforcement and the horse feels safe, then trailer loading is an easy trick to achieve,
Exactly.
right? Once a horse develops fear of the trailer, now we're kind of in the realm of you can get the horse to do the task, but now you have a huge safety risk either to the horse or the human or the destruction of the trailer. I
Oh,
go,
and we've talked about this before in a previous podcast about knowing what happens before what happens happens. If we're so stuck on the trick, but say there's an outside entity. For what I'm thinking about is just getting to the trailer. The human's mind is already on, the horse is loaded in the trailer and I'm on the road, where the horse may just have a problem coming through the gate and leaving the paddock to
Right.
get to the trailer.
Right. That's why if you want trailer loading for life, it is a part of a training program where
Right.
I use positive reinforcement ultimately so that the horse feels so safe and so secure getting in the trailer. Trick achieved, task achieved with confidence, with an internal sense of safety for the horse. And that actually applies to all tricks. So, like, I've watched people teach horses to lay down,
Right.
right? I go, that can be done where the horse goes through so much trauma that they think they're going to die
Oh my
because
gosh.
because there's ways to use ropes and leverage to lay a horse down,
That's true.
right? But it's really all negative reinforcement. So you achieve the task of laying the horse down, but the horse thinks it's going to die in the process, like that level of fear. And I go, so why are you teaching that trick?
In that manner.
I also see it as far as like getting the horse to come to you, like
Ah,
at liberty, right? So people can drive the horse to them with negative reinforcement, or the horse can choose to come to their human and
right.
receive positive reinforcement. And the difference is, it's so interesting because the difference is developing aggression in your horse or developing a relationship with your horse. So people who use negative reinforcement to do these sort of at liberty tricks with their horse offline, off the lead rope, not on a line, walk, trot, canter, doing all these things by hand signals and invisible commands. If you use negative reinforcement to get it and not really gain the horse's cooperation for those tricks, what you get is pinned ears, sour expression. The horse looks for the first opportunity to either run away
Yeah.
and blast out of the deal, or will start showing signs of aggression and even start to attack people. And that's how you teach a horse to become aggressive, is you draw them to you while they feel unsafe and defensive. I go, you will develop an aggressive horse in no time.
Wow.
You'll train them to become aggressive. So, not looking at how the horse is communicating to us while we're teaching tricks and what method we use to teach our horse a task is what makes all the difference.
I agree.
Right. So, and one of the tricks I did with my Arab when I did trick training with her was she would voluntarily lay down if I just lifted her front leg. But this was a horse that the only reason I even attempted that trick with her was because I could walk out to the pasture. And if she was laying down, she never got up when I approached. I could
Mm,
pet her while she was laying down. I could sit on her while she was laying down, and she would
wow.
get up with me on her back. And all of that was just her. That was just
Right.
voluntary on
Because
her part.
none of mine that I ever remember in my entire 60 years would allow me to do that.
Yeah, most horses won't.
One would let me sit next to them while they were lying down, but never get
Never
on them.
mess with them, like
Yeah.
pet them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, you have a horse that's either so confident like mine, or I had gotten her when she was born. So we just knew each other very well and she trusted me. And so that was a trick we could do, but she got tired of it. She's like,
Oh,
no, I don't feel like it right now. And so
so
so I had to respect that. If she
you took
didn't
her
feel
advice,
like it,
her opinion seriously.
absolutely. And if she didn't feel like it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
She had to cooperate. And if
And
she felt like it, I had this great trick. But the secret was I didn't really teach her to do it. She just,
that's a great point, is that the good trainers I have seen are the ones that allow for the opinion to be heard.
that's the real deal.
That's the real deal.
And
It
I think,
or Yeah.
if we want to play with trick training, or we want to look at achieving domestic tasks with our horses as trick training, that we can look at that like creating a puzzle game.
Mm,
And it can become mentally stimulating for our horses rather than frustrating and fearful.
yeah.
Right. So we can turn anything we need the horse to do, whether it's picking up the feet, whether it's bridling. And one of like the biggest crowd pleaser trick I could do with my Arab mare when we actually did demos was if I stood on a mounting block or if I sat on a fence rail, she would come over voluntarily at liberty, no bridle, no halter, no nothing, and she would come up and parallel park her back right next to me so I could get on and we could ride around bareback and bridleless. And people just loved that.
I
Like,
bet.
yeah, because I go,
But
don't we wish? But even if I have the saddle on her and the bridle and I have a whip, when I stand on the mounting block, she still does the same thing.
mhm.
And what that tells me is she enjoys the ride. She
So I
enjoys
wonder,
the ride.
when people are watching that and you said they just love that, is I wonder what they're thinking that is. Is that obedience?
Maybe. I think some people perceive it as obedience.
Right?
Some people may have thought I put so much pressure on her that that was her only option. But I looked at it like, hey, you are looking forward to our conversation and what we play with, whether it's a trick, which is a mental puzzle, or it's actual dynamic training of the
Right.
body and mind, development of the body and mind. Either way, if she doesn't like it, she lets you know. And if she likes it, she does these amazing things by choice. And I've
By
really
choice, that's the big
cultivated,
one.
yeah, I've cultivated that because to me, it's a sign that even if we're struggling in training or making changes or, I'm feeling a little frustrated with where we're at, her choice to come and cooperate with me always tells me she enjoys the work. So I'm on the right track. I may
Yeah,
not be the best at it yet, but I am definitely on the right track because my horse wants to participate with me.
that's important. Yeah. When I rode yesterday, my big mare had a very strong opinion about where she wanted to go. And am I going to argue for 5 or 10 minutes or just go with the flow and use whatever she gives me?
And I think that's the only reason I'm not opposed to what we call trick training, is because I
Right.
think it opens the human's mind that our horse can have an opinion. And when we try to do trick training using only positive reinforcement and we treat it like a puzzle or a game for our horse, then we start to see the intelligence of the horse. We start to realize that we do not have to control every freaking footfall when we're riding. We do not have to demand obedience and perfection. That I think that's whether we're doing practical trick training for domestic tasks or we're doing non practical trick training just for fun. It's like when we look at it and see how intelligent our horses are, I think that translates into the dynamic part of horse development.
I like that. Yeah. Because if you, it's great to have a goal, but you also I want a partner.
Yeah. Or it's like, why do we dance? Why do we sing? Not
Right.
to get somewhere. You don't sing the song to get to the end. You don't dance the dance to hurry up and get to the end of the dance. You,
Right.
you dance the dance because you enjoy the dance.
Right.
And I think maybe people playing with trick training a little bit with their horses is like learning to enjoy the dance.
That's a good way to put it.
And that opens up to freeing us from the thought that our aids are going to create mechanically correct movement. Not going to happen. Way too complex. We need the horse to think and feel safe and trust our guidance in order to explore their own bodies. So when we get into that dynamic realm, like you were talking about with your mare, you're never going to correct a rotation dysfunction through tricks or treats. It's
Right.
not going to happen. The horse has to figure out how to do that in their own use of their own body. So we
Yep.
can kind of guide and we can create a puzzle and we can ask questions, but we can't make them do it.
Right.
So that's what, like when I worked with my mare, I loved, and she enjoyed even some of the non-practical tricks. She kind of enjoyed learning tricks because it was mentally stimulating and it was a fun dance between the two of us. So did it serve a purpose? Well, she got better at some tasks and people go, wow, she's so good at that task. That's amazing. And I go, that's only because she feels safe and because it was a fun puzzle.
Right.
And once the puzzle was solved, she started to lose interest in it. And there were
Ah,
some puzzles, like one of the funniest things she would do is here I am in front of people doing this, doing these demos at Liberty. And there would be some of the tricks or tasks that she didn't like doing, and some of them that she really liked doing. So if I asked her, for example, to sort of trot around me, like on an invisible lunge line, she would sort of like make the circle slightly bigger and slightly bigger. And then she'd like go put herself in the trailer because she much preferred that trick over the lunging trick. And it was always so
That's too
funny.
funny.
At first I would be embarrassed because she was like doing her own thing. And I go, that's actually hilarious.
It is hilarious.
Yeah. And so any trick that involved standing still, she loved. And any trick that involved jumping or running, she wasn't that keen on. And so if she didn't want to jump over a pole or a barrel or something, she'd go, well, how about I go stand on the elephant stand instead? And she would just wander
She
off.
had an opinion.
She would just pick some random trick and go, how about this one instead? And I go, that made the trick training sort of fun for both of us. Right.
Well, that's good that you took it that way instead of going down the negative road of making her do it.
Well, and that's just it. I would also see people whose horses' obedience was a reflection of their greatness, so to speak. So if their horse would do the wrong thing, they lost their minds, and out comes the whip, out comes the this sort of negative reinforcement or even punishment mentality. And it's like, is this about your ego or is this about
exactly.
developing your relationship? Because it's kind of one or the other.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I watched this video once on Circus Cani, which was it's a circus in Switzerland that's over 200 years old, this circus that travels around. And when World War I and II were going on in Europe, the army kept taking all the horses other than the stallions.
Oh.
And so the circus decided they only take intact males of all their animals.
Wow.
And it was an amazing video because they had gained the trust where they could have 15 stallions in this 40-foot circus ring trotting in opposing circles. Like they would do all the gray horses trotting to the left on the outside of the ring and all of the black horses trotting to the right on the inside of the ring. And you have to pause and go, these are all a bunch of stallions cooperating at Liberty, working together. And I go, that kind of trick training was amazing to see because those horses had to overcome a lot of natural instinct to do what they needed to do. And then part of the video, they showed these little kids and handlers, volunteers that would walk the bull elephants, the stallions, the bull giraffe from the circus tent to the circus train through these little
Wow.
European towns at night. And these animals are just like do 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 do, cooperating in their job, obviously happy. Like you didn't see these stressed out animals that were being tortured behind the scenes. It was cooperative animals of all sorts. And they did one act with elephants and minis that was hilarious.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
go, how do you get elephants and minis to work together for a circus act? And what they used was positive reinforcement all the time and built up the performances very slowly and treated the whole thing as mental stimulation for the animal to solve a puzzle.
So yeah, I'm seeing that, uh, putting it in Alexander perspective, that type of training, tricks or whatever you call it, it takes a lot of patience
A lot of
and
patience
time.
and a lot of reading and understanding your animals,
Yeah.
right? They had
Instead of thinking,
another,
I've got to get to that goal by 2 o'clock.
exactly. So they did another act where they had camels that would lay down along, like sort of perpendicular to the edge. And these circus rings are like less than 12 inches high, the rail.
Right.
So it's
Right.
literally like a kickboard. There's
Right.
no like containment. It's not a round pen. It's a kickboard in the shape of a circle that's about 40 feet across, maybe 50. And they would have 4 or 5 camels lay down perpendicular to the ring. And then they had these cute little ponies. And remember, these are all intact males of every species. And they had little ponies go around the ring jumping the camels. It was like,
Who thinks this stuff up?
thinks this stuff up. I know. But it was such a cool video. It was an old blue ribbon video. I don't even know where I could find it anymore, but it was on
Right.
Circus Knie, and Circus Knie is Knie. And Freddie Knie Sr. actually would leave the circus and work with Grand Prix riders throughout Europe on how to work with their horses because his specialty was the horses.
Wow.
And so it translates into normal horse ownership and riding. But the mentality was everything, like the zoo in Pittsburgh, everything was positive reinforcement.
Right.
So it's a puzzle, it's mentally stimulating, and then they get a food reward, as a positive reinforcement. And the things that the animals enjoyed doing and how they cooperatively worked, I go, I would love to see more of that in day-to-day riding.
I would too. Instead of,
Instead of the ugliness,
mhm.
of using leverage, bigger bits, whips, spurs, gigantic saddles that you can't fall out of. It's like,
Or using drugs
or drugs, absolutely. Having to
to get
ace
it
your
done.
horse. Yeah, absolutely. Like all of that is just the human bypassing this potential magical relationship
I agree.
with an animal. In order for what? I go, to win a ribbon
I
for your ego, for your performance, to look great. What's the point?
I
Because it
think it
certainly isn't for the animal or the horse.
right. I think it's that, we've talked about this. I don't know if we've talked about it on a podcast, but the difference between for the love of the horse or just using the horse
Right.
to accomplish something.
Yes. Using the horse as a tool,
Right.
whether it's farm equipment or an ATV, right? Or even like specialty golf clubs for your sport performance. It's like your horse is not a piece of equipment.
Not to us anyway.
No, it's not a
Yeah.
means to an end.
Right.
And a really good friend of mine used to look at some riders and just shake his head and go, that one should just own a bike. If you're just wanting to get from point A to point B and not really have a partnership with your horse, get a bike. It's much
Get a bike.
safer.
You don't
Yeah.
have to feed it.
You don't have to feed it. It's much less expensive. You can
It
pull it
stays
out
in
of
the
the garage.
garage when you're not using it
Yeah, pull it out once or twice a year and go. It's
and
like,
enjoy it,
enjoy it.
and not the day-to-day stuff that we are so
Yeah.
passionate about.
Yeah. And so circuses and trick training is kind of gotten in some people's mentality a very bad rap. And I go, it's like the entire horse business. You can do it really well in the
Yes,
horse's best interest, or you can do it in your own best interest at the expense of the horse. That's always a choice that the human has more than the horse.
exactly. Well, I have the stallion of my big mare. He got labeled as a dangerous horse because he was just pushed, and
Yes.
he had an opinion and he voiced it, and then he
Yes.
got labeled a dangerous horse.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
all the horses that get labeled as dangerous, difficult, I look at them and I go, they just have a stronger sense of self-preservation than another
exactly.
horse. They are letting you know in no uncertain terms, this isn't working for me.
Yeah,
And if we look at it with curiosity like a puzzle, then we could find a way that the horse could feel safer or more comfortable and that it could work for them. Like that's
yeah,
the whole essence of rehab training, whether it's behavior or physical lameness. It's like what we were doing or the way we were doing it was not working for that individual horse.
right.
And
Yep.
sometimes a little bit of trick training opens our minds to that idea.
I like that idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because even if it's like I use treats to teach horses to bridle and unbridle without drama. I use treats to help them with vet care or farrier care or trailer loading. And the more I look at each one of those things rather than being stressful, kind of in a positive way, like I think I talked about my horse that was needle shy and dangerous when you had to give a needle. And I would, cut up a bucket full of carrot slices and we'd stand in the stall and I'd shove carrots into his mouth faster than he could even eat them while the needle was sort of going on and created a distraction. And what was so funny is after we'd let him out of the stall, my other horse might be loose. I had a little yard and they'd be loose. And so the horse I did tricks with figured out first, oh, I'm going in the stall. That's where the carrots are. And it was like a doctor's office. They go, oh,
Come
the
in.
treats are in there. And the vet would stay in there and the treats were in there. And I would just open the door, one would go out and the next
Too
one would just
funny.
voluntarily walk in. And I go, that was just an accidental trick because they had no fear. And
Right,
horses are pretty food motivated if they don't have fear.
right.
And so we set up the doctor's office that always had treats. So you get the lollipop whenever you have to go to the doctor and get a
When you
needle.
get your shot.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So anything else you want to add to that? Because
No.
I think I'll do a video on how I use treats with the bridle because the treats can be used to sort of get a horse moving the mouth if they're a little bit lockjawed and
Oh, it's a
fearful
good
of the
one.
bit. So there's a lot of practical reasons when we're working with the horse learning a task. You can turn any task into a trick.
Yes.
What you can't turn into a trick is how the horse thinks and feels
Hmm.
and how they coordinate the complex biomechanics of their body and motion. You can't, that's where I go, that's development and what I call horse training.
Right.
The rest of it is tasks that we can look at as puzzles and tricks and get our horse to be better at it, more cooperative, and actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So happy Halloween, tricks or treats. Anything else you want to add?
Nope.
I think that kind of sums it up then. Thanks everybody for joining us for another Horse Geeks podcast. Please like, share, subscribe especially if you're on YouTube. Welcome to all the new subscribers. That's been building pretty substantially.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the next Horse Geeks podcast.
Bye, everybody.